Gamers, I'm finally ready to talk about poetic prose. Let's do this! So, before we get into the what, let's address the why. Why am I doing this? Well, as some of you will know, two of my biggest passions are gaming and writing. And as a lover of stories, I felt like one of the key aspects of the thing we love most, the stories in the video games that we play, have been somewhat neglected in terms of reviews and critique of the themes and the ideas that they're trying to portray. If we look at something like The Last of Us, which, as we all know, those of us that have played the game, it tells an amazing story, whether you like it or not. And when the game transitioned from just a video game to being put on the TVs of millions of viewers out there, they also got to share and embrace a story that we loved. And to me, it became clear that there are thousands, if not millions, of video game stories that non-gamers and gamers just will never see because they're not brought to the forefront of this genre, of this creative artistry that is gaming. So that's the why. Now for the what. Poetic Prose will look at video games and treat them as pieces of literature. I have tried to design a 5-section framework that will allow us to dissect the stories that we truly love. Ultimately, what I am trying to do is provide a comprehensive analysis of the stories told in video games, from world building and lore through cultural impact to community discussions amongst ourselves. And yeah, going into this, I don't think I appreciated what a tall order this is, but this is something I'm passionate about. And I hope that there are other gamers out there that are also passionate about this and want to come on this journey with me. Now let's talk about the 5-section framework that I've come up with. By all means, this is not set in stone. So if you've got any suggestions, please do let me know. Because at the end of the day, we are in this together. First up, the first section I call Foundation. And here we will look at the context and premise of the game, as well as the world building and the lore. Essentially, this section, we will try to establish what this game is and how the environment helps tell the story that the game is trying to portray. So within Foundation, we have the context and premise. Here, I will try to establish what the game is about and why and when it matters. Let's use The Last of Us as an example. The Last of Us was released in 2013. And in a sentence, it's a journey of a father and daughter-like relationship across a fungal-ridden America, with the core conflict of the game being Joel's mission to escort Ellie, an immune teenager, across America into the hands of a resistance group. This might seem simple, but the other aspect of his mission is his battle, his wrestle with the fact that should humanity be saved, whilst also wrestling with his own immoral past. Yes, the game is set in a played out zombie apocalypse genre, but Naughty Dog's execution of the intimate relationships that these characters have set it well and truly apart from all the other zombie fest stories that we know of. Now, let's talk about the world building and lore part of the Foundation section. Here we will examine how the game's setting and environmental details help to communicate the story that the creators are trying to tell. Let's use BioShock as an example. Now, before the BioShock fanbase come after me, I have very limited knowledge on BioShock. But with that being said, I do think that the setting the game is in is spectacular. I really love the fact that the setting itself, Rapture, it's so out there and it's at complete contradictions, the violence and the decay that's occurring within the setting. More to the point, the repeated imagery of water, as in water pressing against glass, water dripping from the ceiling, to me anyway, highlights and is a metaphor for the pressure the player feels whilst going through the game and consequently through the story itself. So now the second section, and probably one of the most important to any story, is what I call characters and relationships. In this section, it's a very simple goal. We try and answer who are these people and what do they represent. We will explore character arcs, motivations, and what certain characters symbolize within the narrative being told. Let's talk about one of my favorite games of all time, God of War 2018. Simply put, Kratos has one of the most extraordinary character arcs I have ever experienced, be it in gaming, books, film, or TV. Kratos' character arc literally transforms him from rage-embodied god killer in Greek mythology to a father that's trying to model emotional restraint and raise a quickly growing son. And it does this exceptionally well, to the point where Atreus goes from being the most annoying character in the game to probably one of my most loved characters in all of gaming. Next up, and this would not be a critical analysis of storytelling without this section, craft and execution. Here we will look at the narrative structure, the ludonarrative harmony, and any plot holes or pitfalls within the story that I can identify. Essentially, with this section, I am trying to answer, how is the story structured and does it work for the game? So the first part of this section is the narrative structure. Here we will analyze how the story is organized and delivered across the game's runtime. If we look at Red Dead Redemption 2 as an example here, the game's pacing is deliberate and structured in such a way that over the 6 chapters of that game, you're essentially front-loaded with a wealth of character exploration, character development, surprises, and ultimately betrayal. There are deliberate parts of the story that foreshadow what is to come, and ultimately I feel that this is a fantastic example of how pacing adds to the story and the gameplay within the game. Now, I had to look up a specific word for this, but apparently it is called ludonarrative harmony. And essentially, in this section, we will examine whether the gaming mechanics support or contradict the story's themes and emotional intentions. An example of this is Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. The game's fast-paced but satisfying FPS mechanics add to the story's ever-increasing tension, to the point that you have to come back better and better each and every time. The mechanic itself, when broken down, is quite simple, nothing revolutionary, but that is the point. It doesn't take anything away from the story being told. It in fact adds to it, because in a way it kind of eliminates the controller or the keyboard and mouse and puts you in the boots of the soldier you are currently playing. The last part of this section is pitfalls and plot holes. And essentially, here we will try to look at any narrative inconsistencies, logical gaps, pacing problems, and storytelling failures with specific examples. Now, for this part, I'm not going to give any examples, but I'm sure we can all think of a few. The next section is meaning and impact. Here we will do a deep dive on the themes and the cultural impact and legacy that the game has set. With respect to the thematic deep dive, we will try to unpack the game's deeper meanings, symbols, and what the game is actually trying to explore beneath the main plot. Let's use Hades as an example. Truly fantastic game, but beneath its escape room premise lies a deeper theme, the impossible task of trying to outrun your family's legacy. The next part in this section is cultural impact and legacy. And essentially, with all great games and great stories, we've got to try to conceptualize the game's reception, or in this case, the story within the game, what influence it has had on different games and stories, and where is its rightful place in gaming history. Let's use Silent Hill 2 as an example here. Either fortunately or unfortunately, I was not there day one. In fact, I only got here in Silent Hill 2 with the remake. But when it released, and this is the fundamental reason why I wasn't there when I should have been, was because it was overshadowed by a game called Resident Evil. That's not to say that Silent Hill 2 wasn't critically acclaimed, because it was. And ultimately, it went down as one of the greatest games, not just horror games, but games ever made. And finally, probably the most important part, because it engages you, the audience, the supporters, conversation and future. In this section, we will look at comparative touchstones, future speculation, and open the floor with some discussion questions. The first part of this section will start with a personal critique, where I will try to offer up a balanced evaluation of the story's strengths and weaknesses. The next part is the comparative touchstones. Here I will try to compare the game to other works, be it other games, stories, or movies that have a similar style, feel, or narrative DNA. An example of that would be Ghost of Yotei, and how similar the themes are in that game to something like Kill Bill or John Wick. These are all stories of how revenge can change a person for the bad, but ultimately bring them out on the other side, having learned something important and gained some form of clarity. The next part is actually split in 2 bits, and this is the future speculation part. Essentially here, what I will try to do is predict any narrative possibilities that could occur in future DLCs or sequels based on the creative potential within the story being told and the likely developer/market conditions in the future. And the reason why it's in 2 parts is, first and foremost, there will be a part where I myself will address what I would like to see and what I think would happen. And then the next part is what would likely happen based on everything we have seen that has come to pass. And then finally, we will close with discussion questions. And this is the most important part. This is where I open the floor to you, the audience, the supporters. I will try to provide thought-provoking questions to drive the discussion and ultimately bring in a wider pool of opinions and hopefully foster some great debates. But yeah, gamers, that is the framework for Poetic Prose. Please do share your thoughts, and if this is something that interests you, then please give us a follow. And as always, gamers, happy gaming!